Good morning, Susan, and good morning, everybody. Let me just, there's the presentation. You should all be able to see now the opening page of the presentation. Well, thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to talk to you all. It's a slightly strange experience because, of course, I can't see you and you can't see me. And so it'll be strange to speak with no immediate feedback, but I'm looking forward to the questions and answers at the end. The question I want to look at today is how do we know that we're fit to practice software testing? And more importantly, how do our colleagues and our customers know that we're fit to practice software testing? Just as a pointer on that, I was lucky enough this morning to receive an email from someone called Juanita offering me the chance of getting a degree with no study, no books, and no exams. So I think that's the sort of thing that we don't want in software testing. Right, let's have a look at the agenda now. We're going to start by looking at why we need a professional level of competence in software testing, what we mean by professional, and then there's three key points to look at: how professions define competence levels by looking at education and experience, how professions regulate qualification levels for entry to the profession, and how professions regulate individual career progress by looking at competence. And I also want to look at some next steps for us as software testers as we develop as a profession. I want to start by thinking about why software testing is increasingly important, and I think it's first of all worth thinking, before I put any of the bullet points up, just think about this, where we are at the moment as software testers and as testing. We're a young industry, we're still defining standards, we're still defining what it means to do testing, what we mean by software testing. We know that there's arguments about those sorts of things. And we also know that our reputation amongst the rest of the IT industry is not necessarily as high as it should be, and there's a number of reasons for that, and that we're almost unseen outside the IT industry. If you talk to people who are not in IT, they often don't have a concept of software testing as a job. Now, testing's been seen as being easy and not requiring a large skill set in the past. And I'll give you an example. In one organization where I went in to do some consultancy work, one of the recruitment paths into software testing was people who had failed elsewhere in the organization. And this included some people who were failed receptionists. So the idea was that if you couldn't manage to take a message for somebody on the front desk, maybe if we put you in the software testing team, that's where you'll flourish. Unfortunately, we know that that's not true. And in fact, the situation is getting worse because although as an industry we've done a lot to bring our competence levels up, we're in a situation where IT is increasingly pervasive, business and technical complexity is increasing and the amount of change is increasing. We've got a wider group of customers for IT, more people are using IT, and we need also higher level quality attributes within the IT systems. So, for example, the non-functional attributes are becoming increasingly important and acknowledged as being more important. So we have a multiple increase in demand for software quality, and that gives us a challenge for software testing, because not only do we have to bring the industry as a whole up to the level where we could deal with the existing level of competence required, we actually need more software testers, more system testers. We need to actually increase the efficiency and effectiveness of those testers to meet those increased challenges we've identified. We need to improve the methods and tools that we're using to meet those challenges. And we need to increase the scope and maturity of what we're doing, our ability to deal with different types of software development life cycle, different technical approaches, different CMMI levels. We've got organizations moving up to CMM level 4 and 5. We need to be able to support that in our testing. And above all, I think we need to increase the trust that people have in our abilities. So it's not just that we need to be doing it better, we need to be seen to be doing it better. And I think the only way we can do that now is by looking for an increase in our professional status. Now, what do we mean by professional? If we look at the Oxford English Dictionary, the sorts of words that it's using in defining the word professional are belonging to a profession, well, obviously, engaged in an activity as a paid occupation rather than as an amateur, well, we'd hope we're being paid, competent and indeed an impressive competence in a particular activity, a paid occupation, one that involves training and a formal qualification. So I think that's very interesting here, that we're looking not just at payment and competency, but at high levels of competency and at training and formal qualifications. But I think it's worth remembering when we look there at our vet and our judge that it doesn't just mean working in an office. It sometimes means doing jobs in difficult situations. It sometimes means making difficult decisions. But above all, it means being respected and trusted for the competence and the way that we deliver the services that we deliver. So if we look at somebody like Charles Hughes, who's doing work within the IT profession for the International Federation for Information Processing and also for the British Computer Society in defining a roadmap for professional status, what he talks about is that we have known levels of competence, that professionals take personal responsibility for their work, and that the profession as a whole provides a contribution to society. So notice that it's not just being paid. It's not just having some level of competence. It's a known level of competence. It's not just possession of a certificate because we've passed an exam. There's also ethics and accountability that we need to consider, and what contribution we're making to society as a whole. Now, I'm going to talk about those wider areas in my talk in Stockholm. For today, what I want to concentrate on is how we look at levels of competence. So let's also look at, again, and I apologize for those of you who are dialing in from outside the UK, but I'm going to use a UK example here because it was to hand and I understand it. There was debate recently in the House of Lords, in Parliament therefore, on the nature of professionalism and what the public needed in order to be able to trust a profession. And Lord Benson, one of the Lords, came up with a list of 9 rules by which we could judge whether an activity was being carried out at a professional level. And the first one was that there was a governing body to which membership was mandatory. So mandatory governing body that regulates the profession. And I've highlighted this one particularly for today, a high qualification level, entry-level standards of education and continuous professional development. So qualification is not just about entry, it's about continuing your development throughout your professional life up to the point when you retire. And that high qualification level is very typically seen as being a degree level of education, training, skills and experience in your subject of profession. Furthermore, it's looking at ethical rules and professional standards, that's how we carry out the work, which are higher than those set by the law. Those rules and standards are to benefit the public and not the practitioners. There are disciplinary actions that can be taken, and notice this in terms of competence, that you can be expelled from the profession if your work is not good enough, if you're not competent or you break standards. Use of statute to protect the public good, fair and open competition, independence of thought and outlook within the profession, and that the profession gives leadership to its public. Now, I'd like us to look seriously at all of those, not just today, but in our professional lives and as we're developing as a professional, how many of those as testers, as a testing industry, do we meet? We don't have high entry levels, we don't have universal standards, and actually we don't have expulsion from software testing for incompetence. So let's start at the bottom level that we might look at craftsmanship. Now, craftsmanship is incredibly important, and I think it's something that we should retain during our build towards professionalism. Many testers are working as craftsmen. They do good, skilled work within the organizations they're working. We don't want to lose craftsmanship as we move towards professionalism. We also need to make sure that any testers we've got who aren't even working at craft level are brought up to that level of skill. Some people talk about engineering, and again, not all testers are working at engineering standards. We need to examine whether we need engineering standards throughout the profession or just for certain jobs. And the differentiation here is we have people who can solve new types of problems, who can introduce new techniques, who can standardize processes. We need to look at that as part of our drive towards professional competence. The IFIP roadmap includes a study of other professions and a model which you can see is based on CMM. So the idea is that professions move from an organized through to a qualified through to a governance status as they're developing, and then established professions like medicine, law, accountancy have public or statutory levels. Qualified level example that they give in those reports is education, and in the UK it's interesting to notice with qualified teacher status, that's how you know you're allowed to practice as a teacher. If we look back to the 1960s, it was not at degree level in the UK. You could be a teacher without having a degree. By the 1980s, a degree level education was required for teaching, and as we move into 2000 and the 21st century, that degree level or equivalent is still required, but there are now several different routes. It's not merely getting a degree. There are other things that are required. And certainly when I took my teaching qualification in 1981, I needed a degree, I did a postgraduate education specialism, and I was required to have a year's experience in a school teaching under supervision before I reached a qualified status. So the IFIP study looks at IT as a whole as being somewhere between organized and qualified. There are professional bodies, but there's not mandatory membership of those, and there are software engineering degrees, but you're not necessarily required to have them. They suggest that their aspiration is to get to level 4 in a fairly short number of years. So they're looking in that roadmap to move IT up to a public profession on a level with accountancy and getting towards medicine and law in its status. I'm going to suggest to you that software testing is behind IT, and my reasoning for that is that there aren't really software testing degrees, and we haven't got the same range and scope of public bodies. That may be simply that I haven't researched far enough, but I don't think we're as far ahead as IT, and we're certainly not up to the level of the other professions. I'm adding horticulture in there because I want to use horticulture as an example. I spoke to somebody who's in the horticulture profession. They are at a governed level because not only are there a wide range of degree level qualifications, there are also regulations they have to follow, and they have governing bodies and institutes with memberships, and that pertains at a national and at an international level. It's an international industry. Here's me with my certificates when I qualified with the advanced certificate in horticulture. Now, how do we know whether I'm a professional horticulturalist? When a profession's not regulated, there are no entry criteria for practicing. To be a software tester, you don't have to have certification of any sort. To be a doctor, you have to have gone through a degree level qualification and be registered. For a profession, therefore, we look at an educational level, we look at specific training, and we also look at experience gained during the qualification period. So it's not just certification as it currently exists. I have a horticulture certificate, but I'm not a professional horticulturalist. And if we look at this list of qualifications, this is just one example of horticulture qualification schemes. There are many others, degree levels, higher degrees, schemes which are centres of excellence such as Wisley and Kew. The first qualification I took was the RHS General. That requires 20 days of study, 50% of which is practical, own study, and a written exam. So to do that and get that, that did not give me a professional qualification, but it was a first building block. The next level is the individual modules from the RHS Advanced. Each of those is about a day a week for 6 months. Again, 50% practical and containing commercial aspects. When you've done a number of those modules, and you can do written exams associated with that. Here we've got the written exams in the RHS Advanced, 3 written exams and a practical exam, which takes almost a whole day to do. That's still not a professional qualification. It's a lead-in to be able to do the diploma, which is the first level of professional qualification. That's a junior level profession. It's another 2 years of study at a day a week, plus additionally your own level of study, 3 more written exams and another practical exam. That gives you a degree level qualification which allows you junior membership of the Institute of Horticulture. For full professional membership, you're looking at another 3 to 5 years study, 4 more written papers, a management case study based on your work out in the industry, which involves also an oral exam, and a dissertation on the subject of study, and another oral exam. Now, I just want you in your minds to think about what we do to qualify as software testers and compare that. That's horticulture as against software testing. The horticulture industry, as the qualifications were building up, also looked at other ways of giving evidence of competence. And it's worth looking at that because one of the things they did before they brought into the qualification system into play, and by the way, those exams have been running for about 100 years now, they started running competitions before that, where practitioners, professional amateur, could offer up what they'd done to be judged against their peer group. And they still run those to this day. The picture shows a silver medal winning display at last year's autumn show of vegetables in Malvern. That's a very high standard to reach a silver medal, but it's not the top standard. There were faults that the judges could find with that display, which meant it only got a silver rather than a gold. We could also think about awards, and we could think about ways of giving positive publicity. We also need to think about continuous professional development. And I've shown here a picture from the internet of how you do pruning an apple tree. The reason for that is when I was doing the RHS qualification, we had some lessons about doing pruning. And one of the students queried the method we were being shown because it wasn't the method in the book on pruning that he'd got. And the tutor pointed out that best practice changes continuously. Therefore, professionals don't just go to look at textbooks, they also study to see what is happening in latest developments. The textbooks don't always keep up with what best practice is. And one of the interesting things about the RHS qualifications is they don't necessarily lay down how something is done. They ask that the students are looking at current best practice and answering against current best practice. The syllabuses don't define what that is. They expect the students and the tutors to be going out to find that best practice. So as professionals right through our career, we can't simply rest on our laurels. We have to look at continuous professional development. We also need to look at career options, and it's worth looking in horticulture that there are a very wide range of different types of career, both at trade and professional level, including the highest level of management up to executive level and director level, and including things like broadcast and journalist activity, broadcast media, being TV pundit, being an author, doing inspection of what other people are doing in the industry. How does that compare in software testing? Well, we talk about test management, we talk about test execution, we talk about analysis and design, we talk about specialist areas. But why not these other areas? Why not management to executive level? Why not research? Why not engineering? Why not teaching software testing to a professional level? Architecture, quality assurance and review of testing, sales and marketing of testing services. Do we have qualifications for those? Working for regulatory bodies. And hey, will we know we've arrived when actually there are TV programs about software testing? Now, I think there's some problems here, which are that we don't advertise these career options out to school children and to people taking degrees. We don't promote the skill sets required in the qualifications. Where are the sales and marketing modules? Where are the executive decision-making modules in the qualification schemes? We ourselves don't always aspire to those higher levels. I meet people with the job title of test manager who are not aspiring to influence their executives. They're not aspiring to motivate their teams in a way that you would expect a manager to do. They're acting as supervisors rather than managers. And also, we're not necessarily expected to aspire to those higher levels. If you look at some of the ways that IT career development is described, you'll see software testing not taken up to that senior executive and director level. So I want to know, are our aspirations reasonable, and what are we doing about differentiating between professional and trade roles and actually aspiring to those higher levels and stepping up to them and showing that we can meet them in order that we're a full profession to the highest levels. So how can we do this? Well, I think at the moment here we are at software testing in 2007. I'm going to suggest to you that to move up to qualified is going to take us 20 years. That's not just for us to sort out what we need in the way of qualification, it's also for us to make those levels of qualification acceptable. At present, we're having discussions about whether expert level certification is actually needed and on what levels of training are required. And I've heard people say that 5 days or 10 days of training is too much to expect for a software tester to go through. If we haven't got enough skills and competencies to take us through more than 10 days training, to take us in fact up to a degree level training, we are not going to be able to call ourselves a profession and line up with other professions. To get full public recognition, oh, beg your pardon, I went the wrong direction. To get full public recognition, I think is going to take perhaps 50 years. Now that may sound shocking to you, but I think what I'm saying here is we may get our own house in order in a shorter time than that to be fully accepted in the way that medicine, accountancy, law and those other professions are. We have a long haul in front of us. It took doctors 100 years to move from being people who sawed people's legs off at random and bled them to being a respected profession. That's what we've got to think of. It's a long haul ahead of us. And now there's a route map to help us, which IFIP and the BCS have drawn up. This is the route map. It looks at definition of terms. It looks at the skill levels framework and entry criteria. This is for IT as a whole. It looks at development of the profession, improvement of the profession, and continuous professional development for individuals. It looks at the qualification and academic requirements, and it looks at standards of behaviour, including disciplinary procedures, which should include expulsion for incompetence. And it looks at how we do that internationally in terms of certification and accreditation. I'm going to suggest to you that we might not see that as being a perfect route map, but since it's IT and since it exists, it makes sense to link in with what they're doing. So don't let's reinvent the wheel unnecessarily. In terms of getting organised, moving up to the organised level, we need to think about professional bodies, and that includes craft guilds, because we're going to have some craft roles there, if we're honest. It includes professional bodies for the higher level of management and the higher level of engineering. We may need to look at sector and management and domain bodies, or those may be special interest groups in the other bodies. So do we need particular professional qualifications, say for safety critical, or particularly for financial, or particularly for embedded? Do we need to have a look at people having entrepreneurial skills to take them through testing in startup organizations? Those may be the sorts of things we need to consider. In terms of getting qualified, there exists a skills framework for the information age that's already out there, and it looks at the skills you need in IT to give you autonomy in your job, levels of autonomy, levels of influence you have within the organization, levels of technical complexity within your job and organizational complexity, and what business and other skills, including technical and soft skills, you need. This goes through 7 levels. Initially, you just follow other people, then you're able to assist, then you're able to apply your skills, then you're able to enable activities to go on, enable other people, then you're able to ensure that activities are going on and to advise higher level and lower level individuals in the organization. At level 6, you're able to initiate activities and influence across the organization. And at level 7, you're setting strategy, you're inspiring, you're mobilizing the troops. Now, when we look at this, level 5, let me just indicate level 5 for you. Here, level 5 is where, for the BCS, you become a chartered professional. You have to be working at that level to get professional chartered status. You can be working at lower levels to get membership of BCS, but it's a level 5. You have to show evidence of working at that level to move into a chartered professional status. So I think we need to take that seriously, that we need to be moving our test managers in particular, but also our senior test analysts up through those levels to bring them up into 5, 6, and 7. That should be our aspiration for professionalism. And along with that, we need to be able to look at the role of education, of publicity, of evidence of competence, and so on and so forth. Now, we can look at this. This is part of something we've done in TSG, but that's what it says part of at the top. But it's part of thinking about what we mean in terms of what we need to support that career progression. And the first thing is obviously skills training, not just initially, but right through the expertise levels. It's about membership of a testing community in our work, in professional associations across the industry, and by encouraging more people to take part in conferences and special interest groups within their organizations and across organizations. It's about having recognized qualifications, again, at all levels. And I think where we're talking at specialist and expert, we need to be very serious about what we mean by specialist and expert, what we require those people who are working at an expert level to have, and how we can bring in, over time, degree level qualifications. At present, we have experts who are acknowledged experts, and they don't have degree level qualifications. It's going to take time. It's going to take that 20 to 50 years to bring in that idea of a degree level qualification and allow those of us who are the grandfathers in the profession to hand on our skills into those degrees in order that future generations can qualify into a real profession. And to support that, we need career progression and we need SFI A levels. So, in conclusion, we need a professional level of competence. We need to define those competence levels based not just on education and certification, but also levels of experience. We need to regulate entry and progression via competence levels. We need to support career progression and continuous professional development at all stages of people's careers. However long you've been doing this, you still need to be doing continuous professional development. We need to work for recognition. This is very, very important. To get that public status as a qualified profession, we need to be out there telling our story, telling our good stories, not just to ourselves, but beyond the IT profession. This is going to take time. We're only on the first steps. It's very, very important we keep working on this, but we need to realize that we're doing it for the next generation on, not just to benefit ourselves. It's not a short path we're on. So, thank you for taking part. Thank you for listening.